Welcome to Ekascloud. This webinar is about Ansible automation. It is a continuation to the previous webinars where I have explained how to get started with Ansible and the key terminologies of Ansible, like control node, manage node, inventory, module, play, and playbook. Then I have also explained how to manage static inventory. Then finally, I have also explained how to do an initial setup to Linux manage node using SSH password authentication. So in this session, I'm going to explain connecting to the Linux manage node using SSH key-based authentication. And we will use some sudo commands without typing the password. And I'll also tell you how to find the modules, and you'll also understand what is privilege escalation in Ansible. So I have 3 Linux servers for today's demo. One is going to act as control node and 2 other Linux servers which are going to act as managed nodes. So I have logged into all the 3 servers. And the first device is already installed with Ansible. Now from this Ansible control node, to connect to these managed nodes, you need proper SSH connection from control node to both the managed nodes. So because I have configured all these 3 servers with the same network, I will have reachability, and I have also managed SSH within the firewall of these 2 servers. From this control node, to do automation on the managed node, it is also always going to use the remote users privilege. Because these 2 Linux servers are standalone, I have created a user called admin in this first Linux managed node and on the second Linux managed node. Also, this admin user is configured with sudo privilege, which means admin user can able to execute all administrative tasks within this Linux server. So if I go to node 1, so in this sudo configuration file, I have a configuration about admin user saying admin all equal to all, no pass wd colon all. This means the admin user in node 1 can able to execute all administrative command without typing password when using sudo command. Very similarly, the user which I have created in the node 2, that user is also acting as full privileged sudo user because of this configuration. So if you have hundreds or thousands of managed nodes, if you can't able to create users in each and every managed node, it is always better to have a central authentication server like Microsoft Active Directory or IPA. If so, you don't need to create a user with the same name in all the managed nodes. Now, from scratch, after installing Ansible, what are all the steps you need to do to connect to the Linux manager? That's what we are going to see. Like I explained in my previous sessions, even though there is a main Ansible configuration file and a main inventory file, it is not recommended to use the main Ansible configuration file and the inventory. So based on the departments or based on the method you want to group, it is always recommended to create project directory. So I'm going to create a project directory as admin user within the admin user's home directory. As of now, I don't have any directory. I'll create a directory with the name called project. You can create with any name of your choice. Now I'll go within the project directory and I'm going to create a configuration file for Ansible. So the Ansible configuration file should be with .cfg, ansible.cfg, and now within this I'll do a configuration pointing about the inventory file. So the inventory file is also going to be within the same project directory. So I'll just say /inventory. You can have the inventory file anywhere, but still I'll go with the current directory. So now I'll create a file with the name called inventory because I have pointed it in the configuration file. And now within the inventory file, I'll create a group for this demo with the name RHEL because the managed nodes which I have are running with Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And I'll use the IP address of the managed node. If you have name resolution configured, you can also enter the name. Now you have a configuration file with the name ansible.cfg within the project directory, and it has only one configuration about inventory pointing it to the current directory. I have also created an inventory file which has the details about the two managed nodes which I have for today's demo. Like I said, these two managed nodes have user called admin. I'll go within the ansible.cfg file and I'll say remote underscore user equal to admin. I want Ansible control node to execute the task with the privilege of admin user in the two managed nodes. Because I have a user called admin in both my managed nodes, I'm adding a line saying remote underscore user equal to admin. Just after doing this configuration, it is possible to use the add hoc command from the control node to these two managed nodes to do any task but using SSH password based mechanism, because by default from this server, if you use the add command, it will try to execute the tasks in the manage node using SSH in the background. And in a newly implemented Linux server, so by default SSH is also configured with password based mechanism. So if you use the add command, for example, Ansible, the group name which I have configured in the inventory, -m and ping, this is not going to work because we are not typing the password of the remote users. It says fail to connect. If I use -k option, it means prompt for the SSH password. So this time it is going to ask for the SSH password of the user in the manage node. Because I have configured the remote user as admin within the configuration file, I'll be able to type the password of the manage node and I'll be able to successfully connect to the manage nodes. You can see when I use the ping module, it gave the response as POM. But just to ignore this -k option every time when you are using the add command, instead of typing the password, if you want to execute the add command without password, you have to also modify the SSH configuration. Because SSH is trying to connect to these two managed nodes using with password mechanism, Ansible also executes the add command only by with password mechanism. That's what I have used -k option to type the password. Now to ignore this -k option from the add command or the playbooks which we are going to use in future. So now we need to create a key pair for SSH and we need to place the public key in the manage node. So we need to create SSH key pair, which is public key and private key, and we need to place the public key in the manage node. Because I am trying to connect to these two manage nodes with admin users privilege, it has to be placed by default within the home directory of admin. It should be the public key content has to be placed in /home/admin /.ssh/authorized_keys. So now I'm going to create a key pair, SSH key pair, which is public key and private key. And I'll place the public key content within the manage node with the user which I want to connect to the manage node. So I'm going to place within /home/admin /.ssh/authorized_keys. So the private key is going to act like a key and the public key is going to act like a lock. Only with the private key, you will be able to securely connect to the manage node. Now to do so, you have to create private key and public key. You can again create the private key and public key anywhere. But just for the demo, I'll create a folder called lock and key. And I'm going to create the SSH private key and public key within this folder lock and key, which is within the project directory. So to generate SSH key pair, the command is ssh-keygen This is going to use RSA algorithm to generate keypair by default. You can also use -t DSA to generate keypair using DSA algorithm, but I'll just go with RSA. It says it is generating public private RSA keypair, but by default the private key and public key will get generated within /home/admin /.ssh within this with the name id_rsa and id_rsa.pub. But I just want to have the private key and public key within this directory. Again, it's not mandatory, you can place it anywhere. So I'll say /home/admin /project and lock and key slash, and I'll say Ansible-key. So this Ansible-key is going to act as the private key, and Ansible-key.pub will act as the public key. I'm not going to use the passphrase, so I'll just hit enter, and you can see here it says your identification has been saved in this path and your public key has been saved in this path, which means now within this directory lock and key you have the private key and the public key. So I have created private key and public key within the control node. Now I'll place the public key in the manage node. Because I just have two manage nodes, I'll place the public key content within the remote user's authorized key. Again, if you have a lot of computers, it has to be done, or if it has to be centralized. Now I'll copy the public key content and I'll go to each and every manage node. Because I have only two, I'm going to the manage node. Within the admin user's authorized key, I have placed the public key content. Very similarly, I'll do it for the other node as well. Now I have placed the public key to both the manage node within the admin user's home directory. Now I have to also modify the Ansible configuration to use the private key to connect to the manage node for executing ad hoc commands. Because I have placed the public key to both the manage nodes, normally I'll be able to do SSH from the control node to both these manage nodes without password, but I'm not going to do SSH. Our ultimate aim is to use Ansible ad hoc command without password. So now I'll go within the Ansible configuration file and I'll say private_key_file equal to, it is in the directory lock and key with the name Ansible-key. So because of this configuration, now Ansible knows which private key has to be used when it is trying to execute the ad hoc command or the playbooks. Little earlier, when I was executing the ad hoc command, I used -k option. Without that, I was not able to connect to the manage nodes because control node was by default establishing session with the manage node only with SSH password based mechanism. When I was using without hyphen K, I didn't get proper success message. But now this time, because I have pointed the Ansible private key and I have also placed the public key to the manage node, if I again use the command Ansible all -m ping, this time it is going to use the key to connect to the manage node. So even without hyphen K option, I will be able to connect to the manage node. So now we have successfully did the initial setup to connect to the manage node. Now, as a Ansible beginner, you need to know lots of module to use Ansible to connect to the manage nodes and executing the automation tasks. So the one way of finding the modules is you have to search in Google maybe. If you use Ansible modules, you will get all the modules developed by Red Hat and Ansible community. So there is lots of modules you can able to see in alphabetical order. These modules can be used in the add command or in the playbook to execute tasks to the manage node. As of now, I have just used only one module, which is ping. So the syntax of using the Ansible add command is Ansible, the target node, -m module, or sometimes you need to use arguments. For some modules, just by defining the module, it will execute. For some modules, if you just define the module, it's not going to execute. You have to use the arguments. So ping module doesn't have any arguments. Even without any arguments, ping module executed. But if I use command module has to be used with the argument. So you have to type the command which has to be executed in the manage node. So this time I'll say Ansible all -m command module -a and the command which I have to execute in the manage node. So this lsblk command will list the block devices in the two manage nodes which I have. Now I'll be introducing a module called file module. With the file module, you will be able to create files, modify the permission, remove file, create symlink or remove symlink or create directory or delete directory. All these actions can be done using this file module. Now to use file module, you should know what arguments has to be used. In this Ansible documentation, in this parameter section, you will be able to see the arguments which you can use for the add command or for the playbook. Because I'm just explaining about add command. Now we will be using some arguments to the add command. So I'll use Ansible and the target node, so which can be IP address or group name which you have in the inventory, or if you say all, it means all managed nodes. -m and the module name which I have introduced is file. So you have to use file. But Just by defining this, it's not going to do anything in the manage node because you have to use the arguments for this module. To know the arguments, so one way is you have to read this module documentation page. So here in this module documentation page, if any parameters is marked as required, it is considered as the mandatory argument. So here it says path is required. So I have to use -a, and maybe in a single quote or double quote, I'll say path. Path indicates where exactly I want to create the file in the manage node. I'll just say /tem, and I want to create a directory with a name called Ekascloud. So the directory which I want to create. Now, if you continue reading the documentation, there are some other options like owner. Maybe if you want to change the owner of the file or directory which you are creating, you can use this argument. There is an argument called mode. If you want to set the permission for the directory or file which you are creating, you can use mode. It's very similar to how we use chmod after creating. But while using this mode option, mode argument, you will be able to set the permission at the time of creating the file. Yeah, there are a lot of other arguments, but I'm just going to use one another important argument, which is called state. So if the state is defined as directory, it means it's going to create a directory. If the state is defined as hard, it means it's going to create a hard link. If the state is defined as link, it will create a soft link. And if the state is defined as touch, it will create a empty file. And if the state is defined as absent, then it is going to remove the file. As of now, I want to create a directory, so I'll just use the argument called state, and I'll say the choice is directory. This is going to create a directory in the manage nodes. It's going to create a directory called Ekascloud in both my manage node. Let's say if you have a requirement of creating a file or directory in a lot of manage nodes, okay, so you can use this module. So now in node 1, I don't have any directory with the name called Ekascloud in /tem. Very similarly, I don't have a directory called Ekascloud in node 2 as well. Now from within the control node, if I use this add command, this is going to create a directory called Ekascloud in both my managed nodes. So when I use the add command, I just used the path and the state. Other than that, it uses the default properties when it creates the directory. So it uses the group ID, group name, permission, owner, SE/Linux label, everything as default. Now if I want to check that whether it is created in the manage node, either I can go to both the manage nodes and I can look into the directory. I can see there is a directory called Ekascloud which got created in node 1 as well as on node 2. But maybe if you have a lot of nodes, instead of going to each and every node, again you can use the command module. Ansible all -m command -a ls/tem. This is going to list what is there in the manage nodes temp directory. Now I'll just again show the Ansible configuration which I did and the inventory file which I have. So now the task is executing in both my managed nodes with the privilege of this admin user. And because I have created the key pair and placed the public key to the managed node, so it's the add commands are executing without typing the password. but still it's not possible to execute administrative tasks. Even though the remote user admin is a full privileged user, even though the admin user in these managed nodes are full privileged user, by default Ansible will not execute administrative task. So let me now just type one add a command to show that. Little earlier, when I tried creating a directory in temp directory, it created. But if I try creating the same Ekascloud directory under the root directory of the managed nodes, we'll be getting a permission denied message. Because the remote user, even though he's a full privileged user in the remote managed node, by default, when you are executing the add command, Ansible will try to execute as a regular user. It's like without prepending the sudo command when you are executing the privileged task. So now, if you want Ansible also to consider using the sudo, you need to do the privilege escalation configuration. Finally, now I'll go within the Ansible configuration file and I'll create a section called privilege underscore escalation, and you have to do some configuration here. You have to say become equal to yes, become underscore user equal to root, become underscore method equal to sudo, become underscore ask underscore pass equal to no. This configuration means that when Ansible executing the add command, if the remote user is a sudo user, it will execute the task with the privilege of root. Now once after doing this configuration, again if I try executing the same add command which I tried executing little earlier, this time it is executing with the privilege of root, so that directory called Ekascloud got created within the root directory. So now I have shown you how to connect to the managed nodes using SSH key based authentication. We have also seen how to find modules from the internet a little bit. We'll deep dive into the modules in our next webinar. We have also seen how to configure the privilege escalation within the Ansible to execute add commands or playbooks with root privilege to the managed node.